Mozart has become a household name, so much so that even those who know next to nothing about classical music will have heard of Mozart, the musical genius. Many of those who are more familiar with classical music would not say that Mozart was the greatest composer who ever lived. That prize might go to Beethoven or to Bach. And yet, Mozart holds this spot as an absolute, undeniable musical genius whose compositions reach levels of perfection, purity, and humanity unmatched in music history. So, why is Mozart genius? Well, first, there's his life story, the legend of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. We'll talk about his life, and then we'll talk about the music. Born in 1756, he was taught music from a very early age by his father, Leopold Mozart, a professional musician himself. At the age of 5, he composed his first piece of music. At the age of 6, he began to tour all around the courts of Europe with his sister, showing off his piano skills, his violin playing, and his ability to compose and improvise. By age 10, he had achieved continental fame as a musical child star, having played all across the German territories, the Netherlands, Paris, and London. While in London, he even went through scientific testing to prove that he truly was a child prodigy and not just a very musical dwarf. At age 11, he wrote his first opera. He then went on to continue composing throughout his life. However, he did not have the glamorous, high-paid positions in court that, say, Haydn or Salieri held. Instead, he spent most of his career as a freelancer. And while he continued to compose and develop a career in music, he never quite lost his childish side, perhaps a common trait in those who become famous too young. While he was composing beautiful, sublime masterpieces, his letters to his cousin were filled with smutty, crude, foul-mouthed, scatological content. Occasionally, though rarely, this puerile attitude met with his musical ability. For example, he wrote a complex musical canon to the words "Leck mich im Arsch," which, loosely translated, means "kiss my ass." This is a side of Mozart's personality which is exaggerated in Peter Shaffer's outstanding play, Amadeus, which was later made into an Oscar-winning film. Amadeus is Mozart's middle name, but it also means literally "love God," a cruel irony if you know the film. The story of the play is mostly fiction. There wasn't really a conspiracy with Salieri to kill Mozart, but it makes for a brilliant drama, and there are many truths about Mozart the musician, and many beautiful descriptions of his music. The story follows how Salieri has to deal with his own mediocrity in the shadow of an absolute genius. How Salieri is smart enough to recognize genius, but never able to obtain it. I'd highly recommend watching it, especially if you're new to Mozart. Anyway, in the early 1780s, Mozart was initially a big success in Vienna, the musical capital of Europe at the time. But his money actually came mostly from performing rather than composing. He also had a reputation for having an extraordinary musical memory and a great ease with musical improvisation. In his concerts, people would submit themes for him, and he would then improvise in all sorts of styles on those themes. However, by 1789, Mozart was struggling to make any money. Perhaps the city had become tired of him. He had to move to a smaller apartment, he lost his status possessions, and went heavily into debt. He died in 1791 at the age of 35, and was buried in a common grave. In those 30 years of composing, he wrote over 600 works of music. So much music, in fact, that it takes over 1,000 pages to properly catalogue it all. Hauntingly, the last piece of music he was working on before his death was a requiem, a mass for the dead. He died with this work left unfinished, though the fragments he did complete contain some of his most powerful music. Perhaps we recognize Mozart most for his melody, the purity, simplicity, and unforgettableness of his tunes. Many of his tunes have become household, Take his string piece, Eine Kleine Nachtmusik. Or his simple C major piano sonata. Or the first tune of his 40th symphony. And doubtless many more. Yet, simplicity and memorable tunes aren't enough to hold a status as one of the world's greatest musical geniuses. But Mozart had an extraordinary talent for turning the simple into something sublime. Listen to this moment from his Flute and Harp Concerto. It starts in utter simplicity, but then becomes something more. It's as if in his music we see our own humanity reflected back at us. Listen to this movement from his Serenade for Winds No. 10, known as the Gran Partita. Here's a quote from Amadeus that describes it beautifully. Indeed, Mozart was the expert at taking something pure and moulding it into something which expresses unfulfillable longing. In his best works, we get the sense that he is reaching out towards the infinite, towards something more, something bigger than ourselves. Listen to this moment from the Kyrie of Mozart's Great Mass in C minor, how it rises up, up, and ever more up. And then gracefully back down. To the climax. He had a gift for phrases that sounded like they were just meant to be, that they had always existed and were just waiting to be written down. We often hear the word perfection used to describe his music, and perhaps this perfection is something ineffable, something impossible to describe. But Mozart did have a wonderful sense of balance in his music. I hope you enjoyed this video. I decided to split this video into 2 parts for timing reasons. If it's not out already, then the second part will be released within the next week, and we'll be talking about the sense of balance and perfection in Mozart's music, as well as the forms and styles which he revolutionized in his short life. If you want to say thank you or help support my work, you can do so on my Patreon page. My suggestion boxes are open, so if there's a topic, a piece of music, or a film that you'd like me to consider covering, or if you'd like to simply buy me a coffee to say thank you, then you can visit my Patreon. If you like this, then please do subscribe for more like this. You can like the video and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching.